Hello and welcome to the Wad Fam Chalk Pod. I'm Dylan Weaver.
And I'm Andrew Sabo.
And we are here with not one, but two special guests from the Adventures in Ideology Pod. It's...
Lindsay!
And Mitch.
And Mitch.
Two for the price of one, and not the two we had last time.
Exactly. But we have caught them all, I believe.
Yes, aside from the secret member, but...
Oh, the secret member.
It's you, it's the audience, the whole time.
Oh man, it's a delight to have you folks here. So we'll go with Lindsay first because she introduced herself first. What's your Odyssey origin story? How'd you wind up here to where we are talking about Adventures in Odyssey on a podcast?
Oh man, Adventures in Odyssey was a massive part of my childhood. I was not able to fall asleep without listening to an episode of Adventures in Odyssey for a long time. The tapes,
Speaking
you
my
know.
language.
Yeah,
for sure.
So yeah, I listened to so many. I mean, I haven't listened to the more recent ones. If they're still making them, I don't really know.
Unfortunately,
they are
yes.
okay. Yeah, and I love them. I adored them. Massive crush on Jason. I always thought.
Okay.
I always thought that.
It might be a first for the podcast.
Oh really?
But I like it.
Oh yeah.
I like it a lot.
I love.
Not a first, I have a crush on
Well,
Jason.
to be fair, who does not have a
Right.
crush
I mean,
on
his
Jason? But as
voice.
far as being,
Right, his voice just so smooth. I'm like, he is definitely hot. I mean, I have no idea, but for sure.
Telling Wit
well,
to slow
so he
down.
goes through a weird soul patch phase if you look at the official art. But aside from that,
okay, I haven't seen that.
I think he does
Yes,
pretty well.
yeah. And then I also always thought he and Connie should get together.
Not
Not the only
Yes.
one. Many fan fictions were
Okay.
written.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
By nobody
did.
present here.
So yeah, I listened to so many Adventures in Odyssey, and I loved them. And now it is a completely different story after deconstructing my whole life. And if my parents only knew, they would be so heartbroken. So they don't know that I'm doing this. So don't tell.
Okay, you hear that, Chalk Squad? Don't tell Lindsay's parents.
No doxing the guests to their
Just stays
parents.
between you. Yeah,
No.
Exactly.
You'll be
You can dox into
banned.
other people, just not the
Yeah.
parents. Oh man, that's good stuff. So what was the cutoff point? Because obviously you now are listening to Adventures in Odyssey for your own podcast,
Yeah.
but for what I assume was a period of time, there was no Odyssey?
Oh yeah, I mean, I probably stopped listening at some point, like in my teen years or early teens, and I just didn't listen to them for years. And it wasn't until Candace and Karis actually started doing Adventures in Ideology, I'm pretty sure that's when I started listening to episodes again. And it is so weird to listen to them after a decade or two of not listening to them. It's just in a completely different mindset. Like as a child, they're just fun and like so good, and as a grown-up, you're like, oh, like.
Exactly. I would. Yeah. No, that's fair.
Yeah.
Oh man. All right, Mitch, your turn on the hot seat. What's the story? Give us the breakdown.
Well, I had a little quiet laugh inside when Lindsay was talking about not being able to sleep without listening to episodes, because that's how I started listening. My mom got Adventures in Odyssey cassettes for me as part of the constant rotation of audio cassettes she was getting to try to either get me to go to sleep or at least have something to keep me distracted while I was not sleeping, which was all the time. So I listened to a lot. And kind of would binge through them over the course of a night, because never sleeping is a defining characteristic in my life. And it was an interesting cross perspective for me, because I grew up attending an Anglican church, so Episcopalian to people in the US of A. And the theology that the priest at my home church presented was very different from Dr. James Dobson's evangelical. I don't say this lightly, maybe a little bit quasi-fascist sometimes vision of things.
Oh, you think Dr. James Dobson is quasi-fascist?
Quasi
Is that what I'm hearing?
generous.
The quasi comes in because he
Spank
insists
your
he's
kids
not.
into. Yeah, Mr. Spank your kids into submission.
Oh yeah.
Definitely had a fascist
Yeah.
streak.
Yeah.
He was really curious about Hitler.
I was reading some of his stuff earlier today, and I just went down a wiki rabbit hole while I was looking up stuff on Jason Whittaker for no reason. But yes, so Adventures in Odyssey was a part of my childhood. I kept listening into my early teenage years, because I then further intersected with evangelical Christianity through Bible camp and going to the evangelical church where the girls were once I got interested in girls.
Evangelicals do got the
Yes.
girls, I must say. I've traveled to many a denomination.
Mostly they just have people
Respectfully.
under the age of 80, which is a feature
Right.
you don't get in the oldest Anglican church in town.
Yeah, funny how that works out.
Yep.
Oh man, that's
So,
good.
favorite episodes of Odyssey, like highlights, things that just like when you think about Odyssey, specific moments that come to your mind immediately, just so I get like a frame of reference of
or
what your
defining
favorite-
crushes. You know.
Oh, defining crushes.
Well, we're going to be
Most traumatic
interacting
imagination
with-
station episode.
We're going to be kind of interacting with what was probably my not known at the time defining crush of the show, who was Eugene, and we're also probably going to be coming in on some of the last Adventures in Odyssey I listened to. The thing is that I was so young listening to these, and I was so very, very tired that the stories are completely lodged in my subconscious, such that I don't really remember things. And I definitely thought that I hadn't listened this far until I was listening to the episode, and then I instantly remembered all of it.
Yeah, I have had that experience doing this show where we're like, we're going to cover one that we've never talked about or that I've never listened to before, and then I'm listening and I'm like, oh, I do know this one,
Yeah.
don't I? That's embarrassing. That is way more recent than I expected it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Yeah, I've listened to this one too. I don't know when, but it was, some phrases that they say were just familiar. I can't think of one that I did like the Imagination Station one when, I don't know who traveled. I think Connie traveled to, like, Nazareth when Jesus was born.
I think it's both Connie and Eugene in that episode.
Yeah.
But
I think I remember liking that one, and then, like, Mary gives birth, and then the lady's like, we need an apple for her mouth. And, like, I just remember random, like, little phrases, and just, like, there's one with, like, Connie teaching Eugene how to drive, and she's like, we turn the key away from us. And like, my sister and I still quote that to each other if we're just, we live very far away from each other, but if we're ever in the same vehicle together, we'll, like, quote things like that. Just random stuff. Yeah.
So cute, so fun.
oh man. Well, with all this foreshadowing, I feel like we've got to get to the chase. We are talking about episode 366, which is Solitary Refinement. A kind of a wild title.
Yeah, a wild episode. Like,
Yeah.
compared to all of Odyssey, the one where they spent extended period of time talking about silence is, like, I don't think that really happens again.
Yeah, when is Eugene ever actually solitary in this episode?
never.
Yeah. Well, it's the problem that it's an audio medium.
He's always got Jesus with him, Lindsay.
Right.
And
Is that you?
Yeah, Jesus and his dream girlfriend.
That was the worst.
We'll get into it. Oh man, this is an episode that first came out November 16th of 1996. It's off the Welcome Home album following John Avery Whittaker's return to Odyssey. we've got to welcome him back, and what better way to do that than with an episode centered around a monastery?
Mm-hmm. Nothing says community fellowship like a monastery. I mean, in some ways, yes, but also,
in some ways, yeah. Monastic orders do show up in cities as well. They have little, what are they called? Is it priories? Or anyways, there was one on my block, actually, about a decade ago, of Franciscans just kind of broing it up together in a house.
Nice.
That sounds like a dream.
They held good parties.
I bet they did. Yeah. I've got good experience with that demographic.
And Andrew's a hit with the monks. That's what we're hearing.
Find me a hoot. They love my soup recipes.
Oh man. The one weird note I have from the I have a couple notes from Adventures in Odyssey, the official guide, including that this episode was originally called Eugene's Enlightening, and ended with him joining the monastery, which, spoiler alert, is not what happens in this episode.
So did they
Interesting.
changed it so he originally did join the monastery?
So the first draft, the episode, if you're like listening to the audio, or if you're like listening to Chris's outro, it's credited to Paul McCusker with Phil Lawler as the director. But there's a note in here that the first draft of it was written like a year prior by Dave Arnold, actually exploring what if Eugene went to a monastery and like actually joined, and then they decided not to do that because they had bigger plans for Eugene. And so they scrapped that piece of it but kept it, and I guess there is actually this will be a good question. There's one scene from that original draft that makes it in to the actual episode. Try and guess which one. You'll be wrong.
Is it the flashback where they're all chanting about him extending his sentence?
Yeah.
All right, I don't like you. Yes, that is the one held over. I like the fact that like that shadow that sat on the shelf for a year, and then they were like, we got to put this in an episode. This is too good to sleep on.
I agree. I think it's kind of peak comedy. I don't know.
It's good bits, and it's interesting because I was looking at this episode on the wiki, and also that dream sequence segment apparently did not show up in the first airing. They put it back in later. So I'm also wondering if, with the title change away from Enlightening and taking out that I wonder if there was some behind the scenes brinksmanship as well about not wanting the episode to sound too Catholic.
Yeah.
It was a thing I thought about in a couple moments, but also Paul McCusker is famously now Catholic. So
Is he really? Was he always Catholic?
No. So he if you track him over the years, went from pretty mainstream evangelical to like Lutheran, then Anglican, and now Catholic.
Oh my
goodness. So he really like climbed the church hierarchy there.
Wow.
That makes so much sense for Paul, though.
To the point where he's
an explorer.
Is he going to become a monk?
I mean,
Fingers
probably.
crossed.
I don't want to sound ignorant. He has a wife and kids.
Okay.
Are you allowed to be a monk at that point?
I don't think so. I think you have to be
because that's
celibate.
Right. That was my assumption as
Right.
well. But then I was like, I don't know what the rules of monks are except for in pop culture.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure you have to be celibate.
It might depend on the order. The Franciscans are very chill. They might.
Oh my goodness.
If you were already married, then maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah. So it's. But Paul McCusker is Catholic to the extent that now he makes Catholic audio dramas about saints.
Holy smokes, that's crazy.
Huh.
It really is. I have like that. That's on like the bucket list of like I should
Morbid
like
curiosity.
listen to those
Yeah.
and we should cover them. But also, who would possibly enjoy that content?
I have questions about how many of those saints are going to have an important woman die to teach them a lesson. Because this is Paul McCusker,
Speaking of
right?
You know, it is. Also, one of them is not a saint, but is Robin Hood.
Okay.
But it's still
Classic
produced
saint.
by the Catholic Church, so
Okay.
All right,
A
Pope
Catholic
Francis.
hero.
I don't know. Not in my exposure to Robin Hood, but you never know. Anyways, enough of that nonsensical digression. I don't know. Is there anything else we feel like we gotta really hit up off the top here, or is it time to talk about the actual meat and potatoes of this episode?
Can we talk about how many women are in this episode?
Oh yeah, please. Can you give me you know what, Lindsay, as the token woman
Yes,
on this
yes.
podcast, can you give me a rundown of all the female characters, please?
Let me think. 1 in a dream. So in reality, 0. Everyone
Now, I
else
would
is a
like
man.
to, as the man here, I would like to point out that there is another woman mentioned.
Oh, mentioned. Who was mentioned? Who was it?
Oh, it was the old widow Emma Douglas,
Okay.
who it says
How
that he has
dare
to
we
go over
forget?
to her house
Oh.
briefly.
Well, I mean, then for sure we'll count it as 2. Might as well.
Right, that's what I'm saying. And yeah, and all of Katrina's scenes didn't center around a romantic relationship, so that
Right.
counts double.
That made me so freaking mad. I'm like, at the end when you realize it's a dream, I'm like, she's not even really here. That pissed me off so much.
Yeah, there's some stuff happening in this episode, and I can't wait to get into it. But first, let's listen to the promo.
Solitude, mutual confession, the practice of silence. On the next Adventures in Odyssey, Eugene wants to take a crack at all 3. Sure, he misses Katrina, but that's not it. There's a deep hunger that's putting him up to it. Eugene is considering joining a monastery. But getting alone with God has its own kind of company. Find out who on the next Adventures in Odyssey.
You guys
Oh,
ever been
boy.
exposed to the promos before?
I have not heard that kind of a promo. I think I always just heard Chris.
Oh, you're missing out.
No. Wow.
There's a whole different promo guy for a large portion of the show,
Wow.
and he makes choices.
So many strange ones. But it is kind of like the fun game of how disconnected and wacky is this promo compared to the actual episode.
Yep. I feel like they're all
Oh my
like that. The
goodness.
promos, like even when Chris talks at the beginning and end of episodes, I'm like, what does this have to do with anything to do with the episode? Like it's just so disconnected.
Why you speak now? Why you bring up
Yeah.
the Psalms?
Oh, especially in the early episodes, where it's
Yeah.
just like Chris is on an island, and the rest of the show is happening around her.
Yep.
Actually, with that transition to much later episodes than what we're used to covering,
Oh, yeah.
I missed Chris. I missed the nonsensical exoplot wedged in that doesn't really connect up. I missed that.
Did you miss
Hey,
Bible
there's-
trivia? Because that's my favorite Chris feature in those early
Oh
episodes.
yeah. Did you pay attention? That's
Wait.
right. It was Paul.
Right. I'm going to set this up at the beginning of the episode, and then you're going to listen to 20 minutes that have nothing to do with this. And at the end, I'll be like, you're right. It was Paul.
Oh my heavens! What if it's all?
Honestly,
just
I was
Paul?
a sucker for that kind of easy answer validation as a kid. It's like, haha, yes, I did know that.
Thank you for noticing.
I don't know. That's a very Eugene thing to say there, Mitch.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So the episode starts out with Eugene totally zoned out as Bernard rambles on about something.
We don't know what, and Bernard doesn't feel the point to bring it up again.
That's true. It's just dead in the water.
Yeah.
But the big thing we need to set up here is that Eugene wants to go to a monastery because he feels he is spiritually immature.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are worse tactics, I guess, right?
I have a question though.
Uh-huh.
What does that mean?
It means that he only became a Christian like an album ago, and we have to now develop his character.
I think that what it means is he didn't have a problem until his girlfriend dumped him and gave him a reason, and now he's thinking that that's a problem. That's my pet theory.
You think?
This is so many
Could it
breakups
possibly
in
be?
Christianity. Like,
Oh my
it's
god.
like,
Yes.
oh, we broke.
I've never been a part of a single one of them. Nope.
For some reason, I don't believe you, but
Alyssa, I love you.
yeah, it's crazy. Like, they break up, and then it's like, oh yeah, because I want to be more connected to Jesus. I want Jesus to be my boyfriend. I want Jesus to be my whatever it is, and it's just stupid. Like, as if you can't have both, I guess, if that's your thing.
And I think that I feel like oftentimes when they say that they want to do that, in reality what it looks like is something much more practically attainable inside of a relationship as well. Like, it really had nothing to do with it. It more so had to do with, I want to take some time to focus on myself and prioritizing, like, accomplishing my goals.
Yeah.
And, like, whatever that looks like spiritually or, you know, physically or whatever. But yeah, evangelical culture has this weird not therapy culture mumbo jumbo of how we have to deal with this.
Yeah.
And
Right,
if
you
you're
can't-
breaking
you
up with
can't say-
somebody, it's got to be because God wants
Right,
it to happen.
exactly.
Right, you can't say I need to work on myself. You say I need to work on my relationship with God, and you should too.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh,
They also
God.
have the weird not dating culture,
Oh.
because that's how I got dumped for Jesus in high school. Was my girlfriend had just read I Kissed Dating Goodbye.
Oh, I'm
wow.
so sorry.
Decided
The
that we
worst.
should not be dating.
That you should instead
and
be
then-
courting.
Well,
Not even that.
but she didn't phrase it that way to me. She just had unspoken expectations. So from my perspective, I'm dumped, and then this girl who just dumped me keeps hanging around me and flirting with me, and I was it was actually very bad for my mental health.
Yeah,
'cause
no,
I couldn't
that
figure out
would
what was
be
going
I
on.
can understand why.
unpleasant.
Yeah. And just not because I'm bitter or anything, but just establishing, I'm trying to remember the timeline here. Katrina has dumped Eugene for Jesus twice now, right?
Correct.
Oh, really?
So
Yeah.
she
Okay.
dumps Eugene because he isn't a Christian when she becomes one. And then, once he is also a Christian, I don't know that they're ever officially together, really, but there's the assumption of, like, well, now things will work, and then she slams the door on him.
And that's where we find ourselves in this episode, right?
Yep. This is post the door slam. The previous episode is her, is like Eugene in Chicago trying to break up something that he believes to be is her engagement to another man.
Oh.
They go back to that well too.
Yep, that is where we are prior to this episode, and now we come into this episode.
Because you see, a woman can't have her own desires for herself, for her own fulfillment. The biggest threat to you as a man is another man. That's clearly the problem
Right.
here.
Yeah.
Suppress it.
It sounds like Katrina
I'm
isn't
just trying to
submitting
figure out-
to the men in her life. I don't know.
Don't you know that he's the shepherd of the family?
Oh yeah,
He's got that fancy staff. You don't have this staff.
right. I know. For me, my husband is for sure above me in the hierarchy. You know
And
the
using his
umbrella.
staff all
Yeah.
the
Oh
time.
yeah.
On our podcast, we'd like to say that the penis is the antenna through which the man hears God's will for the family.
Well, you know, I couldn't have put it better myself. That's
Some
beautiful
would just
right
call it
there.
post-nut clarity, but you know. Oh, that's delightful. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So the whole crux of this episode is that Eugene believes that because he can no longer be with Katrina, he needs to go become a monk. And everyone around him tells him, no, just go back to being with Katrina. A definitely cool and healthy thing to do, given the circumstance.
Also as if it's his choice.
Right.
Exactly.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, she's a woman, so if he wants her, he can have her, right?
It's not technically her body, right? It's the state's body.
Yeah, okay. So dark. So dark.
No one's crying.
No, I'll cry. But there's this exchange where this is one of those like classic Odyssey, like not only are there no women in this episode, but there are also no children. Mm-hmm. And so we have the scene where like Eugene explains to Bernard what spiritual disciplines are. Mm-hmm. So that the children listening understand what they are, but also not really. He's just kind of like fasting, mutual confession, like a bunch of stuff that I'm like, okay, as an adult I understand what that is, but as a child listening, what would that mean to you?
Well, yeah, you could recognize it as a Bible word, but beyond that...
I don't know. When I was little, I knew fasting from the time... If you grow up in the church, you know what fasting is from the time you're so little. So something like that.
That's
But
fair.
like mutual confession, I don't know if I would understand that, but that's another thing that's like, we need to gatekeep each other's sins, you guys. You have to have an accountability partner so you can tell each other every week how you screwed up and how you're a horrible person.
Mm-hmm. And then you
also,
get to both agree on it.
Yeah.
And also brag about getting laid. But I didn't act like, oh, it was so terrible,
Yes.
The stumble brag.
Yeah.
I'm just a slave to my flesh.
That's so good.
I did not coin that term. That credit goes to the Good Christian Fun podcast.
Oh, I love it.
They are the originators of the stumble brag, and I am just here mooching.
Nice.
But it's great.
That's a great
It
term.
is excellent.
I
Yeah.
think about it a lot.
As far as other quirks of this being allegedly children's programming, as someone who's had to, deal with the consequences of like eating disorders in people's lives, I think it actually is kind of irresponsible to just throw out the idea of fasting making you spiritually powerful with no context or elaboration and then just moving on.
Yep. Let's just tell all these children that not eating will make them closer to God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. No problems will come from that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
So, funny story. My same high school girlfriend who dumped me because she wanted to be courted and then never told me that, passed out in school once from spiritual fasting. Yeah, not good.
Not good.
Oh, also,
Not a good time.
Also not good. Wow.
Yeah.
The most pleasant stories coming up on this episode, as, Adventures in Odyssey brings out in all of us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say that is a fair point to talk about just between all of us. Has anybody here actually tried fasting or meditation in any form? Because that's a big theme of this episode.
Oh, yeah. I have done fasting. There was was it the 40-hour famine or something? Do you guys remember that?
I did that.
So I did that to raise money, and then I remember my fast was over at 4 a.m. So I woke up and had a bun beside my bed, and I ate the bun. And I was, I don't know, young, either early teens or tween or something like that. But I have also fasted thinking that I felt like I should before I became a missionary. And then I have also had a forced fast when I was a missionary, a 3-day forced fast, which at the time was, we were all like, okay, yeah, cool, we'll fast for 3 days. And now I'm like, wow, that was a forced fast and should never have been put upon any of us.
Let me just starve you involuntarily.
Right, yeah. And it was just another one of those things, at the beginning of missionary training school, because I was a missionary for 2 years, and now look where I am. But, but...
It prepared you perfectly for this podcast.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
beautifully.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just like was one of those things like, yeah, we're gonna fast, and then you're gonna get all, confess all your sins again, write your sins on paper, and then burn it. It's one of those things you've done a million times if you grew up in the Christian evangelical church.
Oh yeah.
And it's just I don't know, it's just a way of manipulation, if you ask me, especially if you're forced to do it. Like, yeah, you're gonna start confessing and saying crazy things when you're starving. Like, yeah. And then I've meditated, and I've prayed my whole life, and then just like meditated, here and there for funsies. So
for funsies.
Yeah.
What about you, Mitch?
For my part, I have actually been to a silent retreat at a monastery.
Oh wow.
Interestingly enough, I've gone several times, and it was an Anglican weekend borrowing the services of a Catholic monastery because there's only Catholic monk orders.
Right.
This episode goes to great lengths to try and pretend that it's just a generic ecumenical non-denominational monastery, but
An evangelical monastery.
I'm sorry. The only monastic orders are Catholic or Orthodox.
Yeah.
Anyway, interestingly, I went on these after I was no longer a Christian, and I still, got something out of relaxing and having a silent time out in beautiful nature. The monastery is at a very beautiful place in the foothills of the mountains, and it was just nice. I listened to the monks speak about theological stuff that I still had a lot of how can I put it? Knowledge and interest in, but it no longer had the same kind of tenor in my life.
Yeah,
so it was an interesting perspective. It was kind of a retrospective, really.
Sure. A little bit more academic.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's very interesting. What about you, Dylan?
I have not participated in any of these disciplines, so I guess I am just as spiritually immature as Eugene, but the only time I have done fasting is when I am too stressed and too busy and I just skip meals, which is not a good strategy, but, maybe it's making me closer to God.
When you're stressed out.
Additionally-
Yeah, nothing like
Yeah. That's when my connection to the big man is the best.
That's actually something I want to circle back to, because I do want to talk about why Eugene is here in the first place. Yeah?
Okay. I like it. Put a pin in that
Wonderful.
one. And then as far as the other ones go, the two-way confession, never been a strong suit for me. Solitude, once again, never self-imposed, but sometimes I am just alone and sad about it.
I'm never
when it
sad
comes-
about being alone, honestly. I love solitude.
Oh man, no, big old extrovert over here.
Okay.
So it's a problem, but what can you do? And regarding silence, I host a podcast, so also not my strong suit.
There you go.
So yeah, maybe I
So-
should.
We'll consider
maybe I
this.
should book some time at the monastery.
We can consider
Maybe
this
this-
right now your mutual confession. You're confessing to us
Oh.
that you're not great at solitude.
That I'm not.
Yeah, there you go.
Wow,
So
wow, look at
Look
that.
at
If
you.
I confess
Check one off the list.
that I'm not good at confessing,
Yes.
that's
There
pretty
you
good.
go. You're
That counts.
already more spiritual.
Just feeling that connection grow.
Yep.
oh,
I will say, the silent retreat is really good for a weekend. Don't do the overdo it thing. I knew someone who went on a Buddhist silent retreat for an entire month, and it was catastrophically destructive for their mental health. You should ease into the spiritual enlightenment, really.
I can see that.
Yeah,
that
no,
makes a lot of sense, though.
I don't think I could do a day. So
I would have such a hard time. I mean, does talking to yourself count?
according to this episode, no.
Okay, because I would
Although
say
he's
before
doing
this
more of the solitary part than the silent part.
Right.
Yeah,
He talks to nature, flowers, all that good stuff.
which I don't. Yeah, like that's something that I could see myself doing on a retreat and not necessarily feeling like it's leading me away from my goal.
Yeah.
It's
Andrew,
not cheating, no.
your spiritual disciplines, Andrew? Where
I
you
like
at?
them. I like.
Yeah, you've
So
always been more. I don't, regimented seems like the wrong word.
no,
but, like,
because that's
you-
not true at all.
I know it's not regimented, but like you're.
No, I like the tangible practices of faith. I would say that like I do
Great
appreciate that. I like, the sacraments, but I also love meditation and like I got into meditation in high school just out of like curiosity for it. I have a lot of anxiety, and I thought it was like it would help for that. And then obviously like. But being evangelical, I knew that some Christians meditated, but it was never really talked about much. And so then, as I got older, I got a little bit more into it and understanding kind of its roots and, in the Christian faith, going back to, like, the first church and everything, as well as, like, what it does for your brain, because I'm in school for, like, psychology and all of that. So, I have a little bit of understanding of the clinical benefits of what meditation does for your body. So I would say definitely meditation I'm a big fan of. On the occasion that I go to a Quaker Friends meeting, I do really like the silent worship where you just all sit in a circle quietly until somebody is led by the Spirit to stand up. Thankfully, I haven't been at a meeting where that's been bad, like somebody stands up and shares something horrible.
Well, they're called friends. How bad
Yeah,
can it be?
Yeah.
Well, fingers crossed, not that bad, but yeah, jury's still out. I'm not making any judgment calls. So I would say that especially silence and meditation has become increasingly more valuable to me as I've gotten older, for sure. Just because, like, even growing up within the evangelical world, there's so much noise of, like, we have to yell louder than the culture, and
Yes.
to take the exact opposite approach where it's like, what if we just don't yell at all? What about that? And how that just, it hits my brain from the other side, and I think, it challenges me in a good way.
So I can't help but think with Eugene's like being like I gotta like get into all of this, all these disciplines, whatever, being like fairly new Christian, also going through this crazy thing. It does feel like I'm of two minds about it. On one hand, it feels kind of like his intellectual academic character being like, how do I intellectualize this faith thing that I'm doing? The flip side of it is it also feels it's also very emotionally driven, which isn't necessarily something you associate with academic science man. So it's an interesting blend that they do for his character that I think, like, despite the circumstances being uncomfortable, it is like, I don't know, there is some essence of the character as we've seen him that is still like held onto in this episode. Like, it doesn't feel like, oh man, this is just like wild, makes no sense, out of left field. It's like, it's more or less internally consistent, it's just maybe misguided.
I'm not quite so sure, because I think that I as a personal polemic thing, like philosophically, I think that rationality is mostly just a kind of fake idea that people use to kind of try and give themselves legitimacy. Like, you're emotional, I'm not. And that's something that, as a younger man, I was definitely guilty of. And I think it's something, as a character, Eugene is guilty of. And I think that to give credit where it's due, there is potential for this to be a very constructive character beat. I don't think that they quite thread the needle on that in this episode. But for Eugene to realize that, like, his emotions and how they affect him are a healthy part of himself that is always there, and that he isn't pure disconnected cerebral cold rationality, that his emotions are actually a part of how he thinks and a part of his intelligence. But they don't quite get there.
Yeah. Well, and it's something we've been talking about through all of these episodes with Eugene and Katrina, is this idea of, like, she is a character who the writers insert into the show to, like, give Eugene some humanity. Where it's like, it is, like, she has to exist in order for him to, one, like, become, like, less of a robot. Mm-hmm. And then two, the natural conclusion of, oh, he's no longer a robot is, great, now we can make him a Christian. And, like, that all feels very, like, whether you can, you know, debate about how much they were intending that to be and how much just kind of happened through the writing process, but I definitely think she's a character to soften and humanize him.
As most women characters in Adventures in Odyssey are, honestly. Like, why are the women characters there besides maybe Connie, who also becomes a Christian? Like, well, everyone has to become a
Whit's
Christian.
just surrounded by dead women.
Right,
Yep.
yeah.
Always.
I mean, yeah.
They haunt him.
He is God, and, yeah. He, too, was, propelled forward because of all the dead females in his life. Like...
Credit where credit's due. I believe we did get the Wit is surrounded by dead women thing from your co-hosts.
Yes, we're doing a count to see how many women they kill off in the episodes. So so far, I don't know if any men have died, but yeah.
Oh man!
But they've learned so many important
Right.
lessons.
So many lessons. Roughly one an episode.
Right. And because, you know, the woman is part of, you know, the wife is part of her husband, the men have died in a way.
Right, of course. Yes, because they are one, so...
I mean, really, they're the ones who suffer. I also, like, apart from the complementarianism crap, I also question whether a female counterpart, or even a romantic counterpart for Eugene, who definitely confused little bisexual younger me, read as a viable romance.
That's so cute.
But, backpedaling a little, Eugene's bits with Bernard are so strong. Like, in the opening of this episode, nuts and bolts wise, I absolutely love how Bernard shows just absolute scathing contempt and hatred for everything about Eugene while looking out for his well-being at the exact same time.
Yep.
And the way that Eugene fires back with, like, the coldly simmering sarcasm. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
That's a needle they thread,
Yeah.
I will say.
McCusker has good comedy chops. Like, overall, his jokes tend to land pretty well for me. And the whole, like, imaginary monastery scene is absolutely wild and kind of delightful, with Wit as the friar and Brother Bernard the cleansed.
Yeah.
And this whole...
And the people, like, the
begging
monks
Wit to
humming
keep
at the...
Eugene.
Yeah, in the background,
Yes.
yeah.
Which I think, and I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure all the monks humming are just Dave Madden, like, his voice doubled. Who's the voice
That's
of
good.
Bernard. Like, it really
It
does sound
yeah.
like an army of Bernards making the sound. And if that's not the case, it still sounded good, so I can't be too upset. But
Yeah.
I'm really,
really hope
choosing
that
to
was-
believe that
I thought that
was
was a choice.
that
Like,
that
I thought
was
that was
yeah.
intended.
I'm choosing to say that it is.
Okay.
But who knows? It's always a question when it comes to Odyssey. I will say that scene is surprisingly long, which also kind of makes sense with that context you gave of it being cut from the episode, because it just goes on.
It does. I
Bernard
mean,
like begging to not have to hear Eugene's voice, and I was like, they definitely could have like not had this be like a 5-beat joke.
yeah, like, why? It might be
I
more than
actually
5.
love that I love it when they spend valuable word count and airtime just dragging out the joke. I personally really enjoy that. So that was probably one of the highlights of this for me. Even though it was a little canned, it still worked for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm realizing I just gave credit to McCusker for his comedic chops, but that whole scene was written by Dave Arnold. So
that's right.
Our true hero.
The true hero.
And yeah, that whole thing ends with the beautiful punchline of Eugene finally gets to talk again after his 6 months of silence. And what does he have but 6 months of journals that he begins to read?
Amen. I mean, got a lot of thoughts. They had to go somewhere. Might as well write them down.
I mean, I never journal more than when I am outside of my own house, so
yeah.
I feel like that checks out.
I'm pretty sure they were scrolls. Don't you hear them unraveling?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great sound decision. Oh man, you also have Friar Wit say that order is not democracy. To Bernard?
This order is not a democracy because they can't, them voting cannot sway the decision-making of God.
Right. Which, of all the stances in this episode, I'm game with that one.
Tell that to every... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good.
I was going to say, tell that to every... a church in the United States and Canada. They're so political. Everything's so political. You have to vote. You have a board. You've got all of this.
Right,
ridiculous.
That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
We're also, it's also a weird, it does feel like it does have more of a high church feel to it, which the whole monastery thing kind of necessitates. But it is funny with this, just extremely evangelical in all the worst ways show that this is to lean so hard into that aspect of it,
and that was so fascinating for me to have Adventures in Odyssey and Focus in the Family dabbling in these kind of high church ideas when by default temperament I always considered that sort of thing to be very hostile to the sort of church environment I was raised in. We used to come out of church services to pamphlets put under our windshields about how Catholics aren't real Christians, which they didn't even do their research because we weren't Catholics, but whatever.
That was awful.
One pamphlet fits all.
Well, and there's another note in the official guide from McCusker saying that this was inspired by a silent prayer retreat that he did, that he's writing from his own experience in a lot of that, which also, once again, the man who then becomes Catholic.
There you go.
You're seeing the seeds of, his desire towards the high church, even planted back in this episode.
Yeah, 96, right?
Nope.
Oh my heavens. Yeah, this is
Yes, Mitch? Anything you'd like to share with the class?
I'm wondering, when Paul McCusker went on this silent retreat, did he also have a dream in which his wife told him that she was wrong and he was great?
Maybe, because that scene is surprisingly sexually charged.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm glad you said that too, because I was
She comes into his bedroom while he's asleep in a dream and is very, very
speaking
just talking in a very
voice.
soothing voice and affirming him throughout, and I was just wow, I kind of can't believe that this is the tone they decided to strike.
Yes.
Katrina removes the black vest and the Coke bottle glasses.
And
they know each other as one flesh in front of the campfire.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys thought that was sexual too, because as I was listening, I was like, what? This is a little weird. So I'm just Katrina shows up so they can do it. That's what I wrote in my notes.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is really what it feels like.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Okay, and so one of the discussion questions for this episode is... Am I jumping the gun on
No,
this?
do it.
No,
do it.
go for it.
Hit me with the discussion question. I love it.
A discussion question is, who do you think was actually speaking in the dream? And from the way the show has staged it, because Eugene is going and being told that he needs to practice these spiritual disciplines to know the mind of God, I think that we attentive children are just supposed to say, God is talking to Eugene in his dream. And that raises a lot of questions.
God is horny.
Specifically for Eugene.
For Eugene.
As we've discussed, fair enough.
Which, who
Fair
can blame
enough.
him? Yes.
Oh, man. Yeah, it is... Well, and that's one of those questions where it's like... There's only one answer that you're going to allow, so I guess it has to be God? Like, who do you think was actually speaking in the dream? That's not an open-ended question.
Yeah.
Prometheus.
Like, are you supposed to say, oh, it was Eugene's, like, own internal thought? Because that's not the way this thing works.
I mean, if you've ever been to Sunday school, the answer is always Jesus.
Exactly.
That's what I was taught.
Or because it is affirming him and like loving relationships, you could say that it's Satan manifesting himself as a woman to tempt him away from Christ.
This is secretly a tempter scene.
There's
He was supposed to
reverse
join the
psychology.
monastery.
I do like
Yeah.
that angle. That's a great angle.
This is great because it also means that then later Wit is a vehicle for the devil, and I'm...
Yep.
You know, we've been saying it for a long time.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, and I mean, speaking of everybody showing up at the monastery, Wit and Jack both make an appearance at this unnamed, newly established monastery.
Well, what are you talking about, Andrew? It's Oak Hills Monastery and Retreat Center outside of Mapleton. We've always known that.
We have always known that. It's right on our
Not
maps.
how they name monasteries. It's named for a saint. Every monastery is
Yeah.
named for a saint.
Can you imagine Yellowstone Monastery? Like,
No.
yeah, exactly.
Oh man, what saint should we name this monastery for?
Are there any saints named in the show?
I don't know. Can we just call it like the Monastery of Jezebel since
There it is.
since he did dream about Katrina, who is apparently now the Temptress, and as we all know, all women are evil Jezebel, Satan. I don't know.
We didn't
worshippers.
eat the
Oh
apple.
yeah.
But you did.
Yes.
No, but the woman gave it to us. Who are we to refuse?
Right, and men have no control over.
It's
Men have
canon
no
now.
control over their bodies. I forgot.
Yep.
Yeah.
Famously.
Yes.
Not under the eyes of the law. So.
Onwards and upwards.
The whole Wit subplot is that Wit has come back from the Middle East, and now the missions board wants to send him out to traverse the world and, you know, be like a, I don't know, give pep talks to all the missionaries at different locations. And so his whole subplot, like the B plot that's like barely even a B plot because it's like a scene and a half, but is Wit like debating about like, oh man, I should go do this, but I'm too busy to actually spend time thinking about this. So he is also going to learn the lesson of sometimes you just need to slow down and go to a accurately named monastery.
Right.
Appropriately named
Right.
monastery.
Right.
There was something that kind of struck a chord with me here because this is almost, and of course they fake it out because there's no consequences or anything, but this is almost a fallible Wit moment. Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Where he's working too hard, he's tired, people are concerned for him, but it never leads to him like making a mistake or overextending himself or double booking an appointment or letting anyone down or anything. It's just a vehicle to get him in the same space as Eugene. And I think that that's kind of a shame because that's something that could bear talking about for these, larger than life figures who seem to be always going and always on the go. Like in activism work, it's like every other conversation is always about overcommitting and burnout, and you're talking about how not to do too much and wear yourself out. And I think that could be like good messaging for children's programming, but no, instead Wit is just invincible.
Yeah, and this is like the whole when Hal Smith passes and they go through that period without a Wit, we get Jason and Jack as what if Wit was fallible in two very specific ways. And so we get that for a while, and then we kind of, when Hurlinger comes back in as Wit, it is almost a return to normalcy, though we have found that he tends to be a little bit more human in that, like, in these later episodes than especially in the ones that you guys have been in on your show, where he's really inseparable from God, and they have pivoted hard back towards that in recent years. But but there's at least a bit of an era where he's got some flaws, and this is right. This is kind of the amount that they'll allow him to be flawed. Is he is not using his time well, and he is not prioritizing things well, and they're willing to draw attention to that, but then not explore it much, and it just kind of gets fixed by it gets fixed by Bernard and Jason plotting, which is a weird moment.
Well, and I think it's interesting the way that he talks about it, because when he's confronted about going away and spending time at the monastery, he says well, I can't argue with you about that. And that is very much like a Wit response, where it's like, if there was a solid argument against it for me to not change, I would take it. But because it's about God, and I can't really say you're wrong and I shouldn't do that. So he's kind of strong-armed in that position. And it's really Bernard is the only one that's able to get through to him, because it's his jab about the bags under his eyes not being used for groceries that, actually sticks, and they give it a solid, I want to say, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds to just land and stew in that before Wit says anything in response. I just think it's an interesting example of they'll let Wit be kind of fallible, a little bit, celebrities have pimples too.
He might get carried
also
away.
Have plastic surgery.
Yeah. Or if he does make a mistake, it's always resolved. I'm thinking of the episode where he gets a speeding ticket. Do you know that episode?
And it was the officer's fault?
It was,
no, it wasn't.
It's
not the officer's fault.
His tires. He got his tires changed, and that alternated the speed of his vehicle somehow. So he pleaded guilty, but he was unintentionally guilty. So he was actually innocent in his own, he was innocent because he didn't intentionally speed. So there's
Lindsay,
always...
I think about that constantly. Anytime there is anything involving tire pressure, new tires, I'm always just how is this going to affect my speedometer?
I know. Yeah.
I don't want to get into the Wit situation. That is,
I know, right?
What an episode. We'll have you back for that.
Yeah.
We can talk about all of our various speeding tickets. Not that I have any. Andrew and I didn't get pulled over together.
Yeah, that was fun. Dylan. Oh, no, I can't tell this story.
We'll save it for another time. I'm
we can leave if you need.
It's not nearly as interesting as what it sounds.
It was hilarious as to how innocent Dylan and I were, considering everything, and it was, yeah.
I did a bad job and hit the rumble strip pretty hard, and then didn't pull off well, and the police officer pulled me over, and then I was confused as to why I was being pulled over, and then due to that confusion, he thought I was intoxicated, so
no.
I got breathalyzed and had to do the eye thing. It was a whole adventure.
Oh my gosh. That'd be so embarrassing.
But, yeah, and I was stone cold sober, so that was just me being bad at driving.
I've never been pulled over, and I think I would cry. I think I would just be so terrified.
It's a good strategy, honestly.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing.
I don't think it works for me, but
right.
I'll try it next time.
I'm sure women get away with it more than men do if they start to cry.
Unfortunately,
I don't know. Andrew can cry pretty well. So.
I'm an ugly crier. Like I'll full heave and sob and I'm just so sorry. And then maybe they'll forget to mail me my ticket.
You just make him so uncomfortable. He's like, never mind. Go home, get some sleep.
Yeah.
Like,
This guy's clearly going through it.
I just start reading.
By the code of masculinity, I have to pretend this never happened, so I'm unable to charge you.
Oh, it's good. It's good. Oh man. Man, we are all over the place. But the main. So we have this thing where Eugene, upon arriving at the monastery, immediately runs into Jack. Oh, because the monk is like, oh, wait, you know Wit? Then there's someone else here you'll know.
Because, of course.
Yeah.
because everyone knows.
Wit knows everybody.
Everyone knows Wit. And then Jack is there. He has a cabin that is almost going to be named after him. He comes to this place all the time, including during the Blackguard stuff. And this was totally established before this episode. Wink, wink.
Definitely.
Yeah, I love how they just throw stuff in there as makeup crap. Like,
Right, like let's just flesh out our world a little
Yeah,
bit, you know?
yeah.
It's weird if we just bring up that there's a monastery now, so it's been there forever.
yeah.
One of our our main character, is known by name, and another character goes there every weekend, and yeah, it's quite the thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's just this whole back and forth where Eugene talks with the monk, Brother James, about like, hey, maybe I want to permanently join here, and the monk's like, well, take the weekend, then we'll talk. And Eugene goes to Jack and he says the same thing, and Jack's like, look, man, that takes a very clear calling. Are you just doing this because of Katrina?
Which is an excellent call out, and like I appreciate Eugene recoiling in the way that he does, because he's very polite in a way that I can relate to. Where it's like, I resent you for saying that I did this for such and such reason that I totally did do it for, but I don't want to acknowledge that.
Oh man, and then yeah, there's this whole thing, and yeah, Eugene's just struggling to be silent, and
Yeah.
he's like hanging on to Jack till the last possible second, and Jack's like, look, I came here to be alone, so properly, like, get out of here, man. And then Eugene's talking to himself about how he doesn't talk to himself because it is an audio show and we don't have an episode unless he talks to himself. But also, this would be me. Yeah. Very much seeing myself in Eugene struggling with silence.
Well, something I took issue with here is that Eugene is so stressed about doing it wrong, but like there actually isn't a doing it wrong. If you're on a silent retreat and you need to talk to yourself, you just do it. And that's the only way to really get to silent contemplation. It's just like if you're meditating, the way to get into a peaceful, cleared mind state is not to like fight with each of your thoughts and be screaming at it to go away. You just see it, you accept it, and you move on, And they kind of missed the boat and didn't undern't that.
Yeah.
No.
Clearly, Paul McCusker did not have as enlightening of a silent retreat as he thought he did. He didn't get it.
Maybe he needed another.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't a Catholic yet, so clearly
Right.
there was still some more work to be done. In God's timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's such a thing. I mean, I appreciated Jack being like, don't get discouraged because it's going to be way harder than you think it's going to be. Like, yeah, there is a certain, I would say this episode exemplifies it pretty clearly, of all these people kind of resenting Eugene, but still like wanting the best for him and being like, yeah, you know what, you figure it out, but also kind of shut up a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I kind of felt bad for Eugene in this episode. I'm like, everyone just thinks he's like the annoying person that everyone tolerates but wants to get rid of, like, can only handle for a few minutes at a time.
Which is, like, my deepest, darkest fear. Like, always like, oh no, am I that person? Am I talking too much? Am I talking too much in this episode?
Am I talking too little?
Am I being a bad host?
You're doing great. Just to tell you, you're doing great.
Oh, great. I needed. That's what I was actually doing there, is fishing for the affirmation. There's all a ploy.
Validation.
Oh man, but yeah. So he decides to spend the night, and an imaginary Katrina shows up in his room. And I didn't even realize that this is the way I wrote it, but my notes literally say, imaginary with a question mark, Katrina shows up in his room, next line, in his room. Like, I was really hung up on that. And then she immediately starts to blame herself, just fulfilling all of his fantasy.
Wish fulfillment.
It does go on long enough that you are kind of like, wait, maybe it's not a dream?
Yeah, it does.
And not only wish fulfillment, but also catharsis. Like, Eugene straight up says he resents the complexities of their relationship, as he well should.
Yeah, it certainly hasn't been straightforward, and communication is not really either of their strengths, despite knowing all the words.
Oh man, but yeah, that's the whole, like, that whole exchange is just such a crazy swing for this show.
Yeah.
That is normally both so rooted in reality, but also not, like, it's rare that Adventures in Odyssey expresses spirituality in this manner. Like, I don't get the feeling that, like, James Dobson is, like, a big, like, and the Lord speaks to me in my dreams kind of guy.
Yeah.
He feels like, and I stared at this book for hours and it gave me all the answers.
Isn't it great when books do that?
But as far as, like, Paul McCusker, and not to harp on this, but Paul McCusker and his relationship with women goes, like, reading the psychology of Eugene in this is that, like, this is definitely Eugene giving himself a break in his mind, right? Like, and who amongst us has not had a bad breakup or a bad setback in a relationship, and then you have a dream where everything is fine?
Oh yeah,
right.
For sure.
That is a very real thing in this episode. It's a very real thing that is happening, except by the terms of the episode, what we're supposed to think is not that this is Eugene doing self-talk in his sleep, but that it's actually God speaking to him. And that's what makes this really... I mean, I know I'm circling back on this, but man...
Well, yeah, but it's like, it's the big thing to talk about in this episode, truly, because it is, right, and it's that question that's in the discussion guide that we hit on earlier of, like, who was speaking in the dream, and it was like, well, the answer you're fishing for is God, but the answer that I am wanting to give you is Eugene.
Okay, and what's so destructive about this is this leads directly into the God says we should be dating sort of attitude, because you have men having modeled to them, yeah, just God will talk to you in your dreams and tell you that you're okay and his perfect boy, and that woman is sorry and that she will come back to you.
Right.
Thumbs up.
Right. This relationship that ended because I wanted it to be romantic and this person didn't. Now it's like, well, subconsciously, I think that it should have been romantic, and because it's unconscious thought, it must be coming from God, so I should actually pursue this relationship. And boy, is that scary.
Yeah.
No, it's really frustrating, and I would say that, at least for me personally, a big part of my deconstruction journey began with the idea of total depravity and people being completely bad to their core. And just the idea that you can't trust yourself. Like, your feelings are not, like, you shouldn't validate them. Like, those are just the flesh talking. Like, shut them up. You gotta listen to God. And it's such a big problem that I have, I would say, with the way that contemporary Christianity discusses mental health and what actually altering, your cognitive behaviors looks like. Like, it's incredibly frustrating because they go to the opposite end of the spectrum from restoring connection to your body and a sense of groundedness and identity, to get rid of your identity completely and focus on something that you can't concretely experience. I mean, you can have illusions of it and connections to it, but you can't. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
God doesn't shiver when he gets cold. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that is such a good insight, because like Eugene has this thing where he thinks of himself as rational and struggles with his emotions because he thinks of himself as severed from them and above them. And you have the same problem in the kind of Neoplatonism that runs through evangelical Christianity and other. I mean, historically, it's plagued. It's been a problem.
Sure.
Where, God is rational and good and unphysical, and your body and your feelings and your needs are corporeal and flawed, imperfect and evil, and lies, right? And in Eugene's cerebral and how he thinks of himself character, he is mirroring that, right? Like, he's modeling that.
Yeah. Well, and this episode's coming to at a point, like, your 90s, your early 2000s, Christianity, especially in the evangelical sense, has such and I mean, it continues through to today, but has such an emphasis on everything. We have to be able to explain it all. Let's take the mystery out of faith. Let's prove it all with science. Jordan Peterson's still doing things in this vein today of like the
not very well.
No, I trust me, I agree. But like the idea of like, oh man, like church is great. Like, you should be able to like respect church even if there's not a God behind it. And I'm like, I have a lot of hurt feelings and friends who would say otherwise. But sure, go off, I guess. Like it is one of the most frustrating aspects of the modern church, is this obsession with being right and things being provable, when it's like, it's literally called faith. If you're taking that, like, if you can fully rationalize it, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if the rational is what's selling you on it, you've really gone off the rails.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Well, you're just missing out.
For sure. Like that's kind of my litmus test now for, like, as a former believer, I'm not automatically hostile to matters of faith, but my measuring stick for stuff with regards to, like, the problem of evil, it's like, if you think you've got a really good answer for the problem of evil, I'm very suspicious of you. If you're a believer and your answer to the problem of evil is, well, I don't know, I'm like, okay, you're fine. You're probably fine.
Normal human doesn't have all answers. Good job.
Yeah.
If that is not an issue that you are wrestling with, regardless of like what your faith looks like, if you are not wrestling with that issue and you just have peace with it, like,
Tweet
who
at
are
me.
you?
I need to know.
Don't tweet at me. Please do not, because the people who think they have that answer don't have the answer that I want to hear.
That's fair.
Yeah.
It could be useful for rounding them up and reporting them, though. A sort of bait.
Sure.
If you will.
Also, if you're on Twitter at this point, don't tweet at me.
Yeah, I say that like I actually use Twitter.
That being
my
said, tweet at the podcast account if you feel like it, if it still exists, you know.
Engagement always helps.
But I am personally trying to be on that place as little as possible. Anyways,
So, I guess the least for me, the last thing is the bit with Eugene and Wit, right?
well, before Eugene and Wit, we do have to address that Dream Connie Oh, what a Freudian slip there.
Oh, was it?
Wait a minute.
So you're a Eugene Connie shipper, I see.
Every single dream.
Yeah, no, that's not a Eugene and Connie. It's a me and Connie problem.
Connie
was
has
the
red hair,
slip.
right?
Yeah, for sure. And green
Okay,
eyes.
Yep.
But, anyways, the Dream Katrina, or as she is later referred to in my notes, Dream Trina, wakes Eugene up to tell him it's morning in once again a scene that has so much sexual energy.
Oh,
Where it's like, not only was she there when he went to bed, she is now waking him up the next morning.
it really has
Imagine Ebony-
a lot of Ruth and Boaz vibes to it.
Oh,
She was sleeping at his feet
Yep.
overnight. Is that
Yeah.
what we're going with?
I was gonna go with Christmas Carol, like kind of like I'm being haunted by
Okay.
ghosts of the past.
There's that too.
I think the
Oh,
Boaz
man.
one's more romantic, but I think the idea of Scrooge being horny for one of the ghosts is funny.
That's better. Yeah, that's better.
But yeah, and it's just Eugene bemoaning the current state of their relationship to this version of Katrina that he has now accepted as a dream, but is just projecting onto. And he has this, like, brutal line of, like, we should have simply fallen in love and proceeded with marriage. Other couples do it, why couldn't we? And the one thing I'll give to the credit of the show at this point is that they are putting obstacles there. Like, they didn't make it that straightforward. And it's when the show is leaning on its more sitcom nature than its, or soap opera nature, truly, than its evangelical nature. But, like, obviously, they do wind up getting married, so all of this point it ends up being moot. But in this moment, there is a nice thing where it's like, you're right, the obvious narrative choice here would have been, hey, these two people are in love. We've removed the obstacle of Eugene is not a Christian and Katrina is. Now they're both Christians. Let's just marry them and move on. And we do have this moment of in their relationship where they're not together, and it's an interesting thing where it's like they don't get married until their marriage happens off screen when Will Ryan exits the show. And so it's one of those things where I don't know, it's hard to know what the intention of the writers was, and I never have a good gauge on how big picture they're thinking. Like, were they just in this moment going, okay, let's throw a wrench in this and we'll see what happens? Or were they going, let's throw a wrench in this so that we can bring them back together later and make it stronger? With the way it winds up going, probably the latter, but I also, I don't want to assume that they're thinking that long term.
Yeah. That might be too generous.
I wonder if from like a didactic children's show perspective, they didn't want to model convert to be with the person that you have a crush on.
I mean,
Which kind of is what happened.
For sure.
I mean, I don't know. It's an evangelical, show. So I would say that, you know, the first person as young as possible that you're with, you should marry.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
For sure.
That's why I got married at 14. It was a great idea.
But yeah, it is. Yeah, it is one of those things where it's like, right, was this a responsible decision that they made? It would be cool if it was, but I also feel like converting someone so you can date them is also like the evangelical wet dream. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they have to be equally yoked. This reminds me so much, if you're on our Patreon, not to plug our podcast while we're on your podcast, but
no, absolutely
if you
do.
join
That's why
our
you're
Patreon, this is all the Christian Todd books. Like, they cannot be together until she becomes a Christian, and then they are finally equally yoked and can then kiss.
Well, and there's
that's the start of it, that they can kiss. They don't kiss until
and then they can get married. Yeah. Those are the two. That's the natural progression.
You kiss
both
someone
because
Christians,
they're definitely not dating.
Then you kiss. Then you become married. That's how I
and they can't really make up their minds, which is why I was wondering if that's what they were going for, trying to avoid. Because in those books, which also have a connection to focus on the family, like they can't make up their mind. There's a sermon about not dating people to convert them, but that is definitely exactly the reason that the protagonist converts to Christianity, is because she wants to be with the hot surfer boy.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Yeah. Which, to be fair, I like Eugene's. The moment where Eugene converts is not motivated purely by Katrina, and I do appreciate that decision. And maybe that is part of that whole, like, we gotta hedge this so that we're not preaching a sermon of convert to date. But they do make that decision have stakes beyond just this is something I'm doing for romantic reasons, even if that is kind of the undertone. It's a needle, you know. We gotta thread that needle carefully.
Exactly. I would just like to say that from like a popularity standpoint, like if you are the person at youth group that is dating the non-believer and then they become a believer, like, one, huge status boost for you and all your friends. Like, everybody gets it. Your parents get it. Everybody gets it. And then two, like, you're kind of better than everybody because you have, like, the best of both worlds of dating a not Christian that's, like, actually Christian. Yeah.
Yep.
Totally not speaking from personal experience here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Andrew, any
Nice.
Oh, no, I've never, Dylan's known me a really long time. I think you can attest that I don't think I've ever dated convert. I don't think that's ever happened.
No, I don't think that's ever been quite your move. However,
no.
New believer?
Yeah, well, I do have a bit of a track record with that.
Let someone else do all the hard work and then just scoop them up.
Evangelistic flirting was a go-to for middle school Andrew, so.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I was truly a I mean, if I could just go back.
I'm glad that you can at least admit that now.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Here's the thing: is I might have been guilty of it as well. I was just blissfully unaware.
I think I said in my intro that I started going to evangelical churches because it's where the girls were, right? Yeah, that is how they hooked me, and I didn't even get the girl, but they got me leading youth group. They got me being a Bible camp counselor. Yeah, I did.
Bro.
That's good. Yep. Oh man. So yeah, then the final scene is Whit shows up in the woods. He might be like Eugene's convinced he's a mirage.
Yeah.
For quite a while. To the point where he's like willing to say some stuff that he wouldn't necessarily have said before. I just like that they're really leaning into like Eugene is that level of delirious, having tried to spend a weekend on his own in which he spent a decent amount of time with Jack and with brother James, but like it was still so solitary that he thinks Whit might be in his head. And I have had experiences where I think dreams are reality. I have never had an experience where I thought reality was a dream.
Okay. So remember what I said about the dream that you have about a relationship rupture where everything is okay? So I had one of those that was so convincing. I went to high school the next day thinking I was still together with this girl for most of the day.
Oh, buddy.
That's sad.
My heart goes out to young
sad.
Mitch.
It was sad. Yep. That was... I mean, it was funny afterwards. It's funny now.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, that's a great story to have, but, like, it can't be fun in the moment. Because, like, my version of that is, like, when you dream that you're, like, wake up, go to school, you're halfway through the school day, and then you wake up from your dream and you're like, oh, now I have to do that all over again. But at least that's not, like, affecting the reality of my day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I never have had a dream where everything is okay with a relationship. It's always like me and my husband, because my husband's American and I'm Canadian. I still, after 11 years of marriage, have dreams where we're having issues with our visa and I can't cross the border or he can't cross the border. So we're trying to figure out if we're breaking up or what's happening. It's never okay in my dream.
But I think, not to be amateur dream analysis over here, but I imagine that if you're dreaming about bad stuff going on with your relationship, that means your relationship's probably going really good.
Right.
Because I only have dreams about good stuff when my relationship is tanking hard.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I'll take it.
Oh. That was good. I like that. Well done, Freud.
And so, then Eugene, just expresses to Whit that he would hate to see Whit go on his, like, travels across the world. He just got back. He wants, Whit to be his mentor. He sees him as a spiritual father, and we go out on them praying together, which has never happened before, apparently.
Yeah, when they said, I don't think we've ever actually prayed together before, I'm like, are you serious? You guys have never prayed together before.
Yeah, I mean, like, you have the whole thing where, like, Whit is in the Middle East when Eugene becomes a Christian.
Okay.
But I'm also, like, there's gotta be, I don't know, like, when Eugene experiences hell, Whit's still around for that. Do they not pray together?
I don't know if I remember that.
Like,
no, Whit's not around for that. It's
no,
Jack.
Whit's around for the mortal coil. He's not around for Eugene's conversion.
Oh.
Because the mortal coil is Whit's program,
yeah.
and Whit goes to heaven, and Eugene goes to hell. It's an imagination station.
That's awful.
If you haven't heard it, you have saved yourself from so much trauma growing up. And now you can subject yourself to that, in your adult life with fresh eyes.
That was such a disappointment. Man, I think I mentioned this to you in the email because I was researching, trying to remember things. Eugene's conversion was such a disappointment for me growing up because, like, I was a knowledge-hungry young kid. I resonated with Eugene a lot. And I had questions. Like, I always had questions, and I could see the writing on the wall. Obviously, this Eugene character is going to convert at some point in this show, and maybe I will have some questions answered. But instead, he basically he does it because he is at an emotional nadir. He's told that he can't help because he's not a Christian. He wants to date a girl. And he went through a torture program experiencing hell, basically being brainwashed. So none of his intellectual objections ever get confronted or resolved.
Right.
And I felt cheated,
Rightfully so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's just bad writing, and I think it's skirting complicated topics that I can understand why you wouldn't want to talk about it to kids, but I also think that it's important for kids to know why they believe what they believe, and kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for as far as being able to understand complicated abstract concepts.
And it felt so cheap because they introduced this, oh, here's an intellectual foil who's not a believer. And then they kind of skip past the part where they convince him to, now the intellectual foil who wasn't a believer is a believer because our faith is so rational and strong. And it's like, you didn't actually do it. You didn't do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was, and it's all about seeing what the people around him are doing, which is it's a more reasonable thing to be like, oh, I am drawn to this because I see the people around me gain benefit from this. But it is also a less satisfying thing, especially if you're coming at it as a kid with questions. And he's the one character who gets to ask questions.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, my heavens. Well, I'm sorry. Go for it, Dylan.
Well, I was just going to say, because apparently my job this episode is just beating drums for the tiny moments of, like, actual appreciation I have for this episode. They're apparently there, and I need to draw attention to them. So we do have the thing where Bernard and Jason have sent Whit to the monastery to stop Eugene from becoming a monk, which is, once again, crazy. But Eugene comes to that conclusion on his own and expresses it to Brother James before Whit arrives. And I do appreciate that it's not a thing where Whit rushes into the scene and is like, hey, I'm here, I'm Whit, let me speak some wisdom into your life. That it is a journey that Eugene is allowed to do on his own. That they don't undercut the whole title of the episode being Solitary Refinement by having someone external to Eugene give him the answers, when it seems like that is the obvious road that they would take.
And I think if it was Lawler and not McCusker or something like that, like, very easily could have been that. Or maybe that's how Arnold had written it originally and McCusker changed it. Like,
Arnold wanted him to stay a monk, so...
True.
And it's also a very sweet character moment because Whit is not swooping in as the teacher figure who figures it out for him. Instead, they actually get to share this. Like, it's still a mentor-student moment, but it's an emotional mentor-student moment.
Great.
Instead of being just abstract teaching. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That is, that is the end of my notes. I feel like we've really run the gamut here, but if anyone has stray observations, closing notes, something that they didn't get to say that they really feel like they've got to, and I've got Mitch freaking out, so hit me with it.
Sorry, there was one thing that I forgot. When Jason is trying to talk to his father, he sounds like he belongs in it. I'm sorry, I know that he has to be the sexy NSA spy, but he sounds like he should be in a different show. Like, he sounds like he's doing voice work for a Tom Clancy.
Very much so.
Novel read along. It's like, when are you going to have time to make your decision? The board is still waiting for your answers. This isn't the sound of a son concerned about his father talking to him. This is like Jack Ryan justifying torture on a brown person. You know? Like...
Yeah. No, very, very fair. I do, yeah. Townsend Coleman is he's such a strong voice actor. Mm-hmm. And like,
oh, it's strong.
And they bring him in to be Spy Guy, but now we're in this transition where it's like, the spy stuff is gone, Dr. Regis Blackard has been vanquished, what are we going to do with this guy? And it's just like, he's going to give advice to his father, but in the exact same tone.
Yes. Makes perfect sense.
Good.
Yeah. I don't think that I have any major observations that I didn't already touch on. Yeah.
I have one last thing. It's my favorite, just a random thing. When he's talking to the brother James or whatever his name is, he's like, it often usually takes days for people to be cleansed, for God to get all the rubbish out so he can work in a more pure environment. in my notes, I just wrote off because that's just like the insidious purity culture in every crack and crevice of evangelicalism that I, took to heart, hook, line, and sinker.
Oh, yeah.
And so
I'm awful.
Always thinking I was dirty and gross, even though I was like the quintessential good Christian girl my whole life. I always thought I was dirty and bad. And now looking back, it breaks my heart to think that I was ever thought that, because I cannot imagine. I have 2 young kids. I cannot imagine teaching them from the time they're little, by the way, you're a dirty sinner. Like telling these sweet,
thank goodness
these sweet,
Jesus
innocent...
jumped in front of God's bullet for you.
Yeah, right? So that's just one thing that stuck out to me, that insidious purity culture just floating around in every area.
Yeah. That is, I'm so glad you hit on it, because that line, there's just so much of this episode is of my frustrations with this episode are summed up in that, because it comes on the heels of Eugene explaining that he had a dream to brother James, and being like, oh yeah, it normally takes a while for you to get to the state where you could have a dream like that. Yeah. And I'm like, this sounds so traumatic.
Yep.
Oh man,
an ayahuasca ceremony, if you will.
Hey, I mean, I'd listen to that episode of Odyssey. That
would be an incredible episode.
That is what the Imagination Station is for.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, why don't we have an ego death program? I mean, that's kind of Mortal Coil, but not quite.
That one's just death.
Yeah. Oh my heavens.
All right. Well, yeah. Thank you once again for being willing to come on this show. It was a blast getting to have the 2 of you here. What would you what do you have to promote? That's the transaction that podcasts do, is you agree to come on this thing, and then I give you time at the end to talk about your thing. So, have at it.
Go for it, Mitch.
Okay, so our show is Adventures in Ideology. Our main content is examining particularly early episodes of Adventures in Odyssey through a deconstruction lens. The core team of our show grew up very deep in the culture, and I'm there as kind of the sidebar who collided with it in high school. And we also have a Patreon where we talk about similar non-Adventures in Odyssey, but still often focus on the family or just personal topics through a similar critical lens. We do examinations of the Christy Miller Harlequin romance novels, but for chaste young women, books, which are amazing. They are a trip.
Maybe I need to dive into that, because that's one of those things that as a young Christian man I was never exposed to. I got to read Ted Dekker horror novels instead,
I learned so much about what went wrong in my dating career in high school because I got to see what was being taught from the other side.
Oh, that's good.
We are currently on hiatus, but still active. We have a patrons-only Discord that we still talk about things in. We have a tight little community. I'm not sure. Okay, so don't quote me on this if you lose money, but you can probably join our Patreon, which is not billing right now while we're on break, and take a sample or just download everything. It's okay. See what you think. You can find us at Ideology Podcast on Instagram, and I think maybe still Twitter, but why? And on our website, adventuresinideology.ca.
Ooh, Canadian.
Is there anything I'm missing, Lindsay? Yes, and we are Canadian.
No, I think you hit everything. Sounded good to me.
All right.
Cool. Well, yeah, it's been an absolute delight. And with all that being said, we will be back next week with episode 367, The Decision. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.